I'm just going to launch right into it. I had a friend with a podcast asked me to be a guest on the show to talk about some esoteric matters and spirituality and whatnot, and was asking some background. And I'd got a couple emails as well of people asking about, why this, why that. And, I think I'm just going to go back a little bit and give just a little brief history so it's not just one big Aleister Crowley party, because that was kind of beginning. I started out going to church every Sunday. When I was about 3 or 4 years old, my mom decided it was a good idea to go with my cousin and my uncle and my aunt and their children. And I started going. And I went for a couple years to, Bible school. And then at a point, I think I was 4 or 5 years old, Mother said, I came to her and said, hey, look, I'm tired of going by myself, and I want you and Dad to go. And I want you to wear those robes and sing, and Dad to pass that plate around. And I guilted her into it. And she's been devout ever since. That week, she flipped the script, and it's pretty amazing. And she ended up becoming a very well-known gospel singer in this area. Let's just put it that way. She's a high soprano. She was amazing. She would sing, and I'd see people observing, and they'd be crying, and she was very good at what she did. And she raised us up right, me and both of my younger brothers. So I have that Judeo-Christian. It was a non-denominational Christian church, so that meant there were Catholics, Jewish folks, whoever wanted to come in could come in. And they preached right out of the King James, and that's how it went until I was about 18. Learning Bible verses, going to youth groups, the whole 9 yards. And then as I got older, I actually did think about going to Cincinnati Bible College. I wanted to be a preacher. And I decided at the last minute, after talking to the one lady on the telephone, I said, hey, do you guys have anything for like televangelism? I want to get on TV and be a celebrity. And she laughed, and she was like, no, we don't have anything like that, but we really should. And in that moment, I decided it wasn't for me. I was afraid I was going to slip up and say, shit or the F word in the pulpit when I got excited talking, and it just wasn't a fit. It wasn't the right fit. And it was right about that age. I was just getting ready to graduate high school. I was 18, partied on the weekends, raising hell, and Mom was tired of waking me up Sunday mornings to go to church. She's like, look, you're a grown-ass man now. It's your decision. If you want to turn your back on the church and not go anymore, that's going to be on you. And that's precisely what I did. I wanted to be a rock star. And I was busy on Saturday night going out to the clubs to see the bands and things like that. And it just, it felt like the right time. I'd learned all the Bible verses and everything, and I had actually seen, back then, you didn't have emo kids, and, I mean, we did, but they didn't have a classification yet. They were just those weird kids, the ones wearing the emo stuff, the Cure shirts, and that kind of thing. And there was a girl that was in the youth group that had asked some pointed questions of the youth advisor, and he didn't have adequate answers. And then they kind of flipped the script on her and made her out to be a bad person for asking, in some cases, kind of an obvious question. And that was very eye-opening. That was very eye-opening to me, that there were very serious questions being asked, and the persons in charge were giving inadequate answers. And when they would get frustrated, then they would just turn it around on the individual like they were stupid for asking the question. And I was always raised to believe that there's no stupid questions. So this was a conundrum. Couldn't really wrap my head around it. And I had started to stop going to church altogether at that point. And I was getting into my own world. And this went on for a minute. I quit altogether and just went on partying and decided that, okay, I'm going to stop living my life this way and start living it this way, the way I want to, instead of looking over my shoulder that someone was watching me do something that I shouldn't be doing. And I decided I wanted to be in a band a long time ago. I wanted to be a rock star. I couldn't play guitar, but I knew I might be able to do the vocal thing. And I was making fun of the vocals in the car one night, and the fellas that I was hanging out with that were putting a band together heard me, and they're like, hey, we want you to do vocals in our band. You can do this stuff, no problem. I was more or less mocking the death metal stuff because I really wasn't as into it as they were. And I was more into the classic rock at that point. My Dramation went Alice Cooper, Kiss, Led Zeppelin, and I got into a lot of classic rock for that time period. And then about 86, I discovered King Diamond, 86 or 87. And then it was Metallica after that. And then once I became a senior in high school, it was all death metal, Florida death metal all the time. We were listening to Deicide and Cannibal Corpse and Broken Hope and just a lot of those bands and some of the hardcore bands. And I knew I wanted to go to the more extreme route, but I wasn't exactly sure, where I wanted to go. And then I want to say it was the summer of 97. We were driving around, Big J, Mr. Muckles, and Mosey and me, and they put on Dissection, Storm of the Light Bane, and that was it. When I heard Where Dead Angels Lie and Soul Reaper, some of the other songs that were on there, blew me away. I was like, play it again, Sam. And we just listened to that CD that entire week. And I said, I'll do it. Yeah, if we're going to do music like this, let's do it. And it was balls to the bandsaw after that. We were off and running. We decided we wanted to be the heaviest black death metal band in the area, garage death metal band. And we had elements of the black metal, and then like the really high screams that came with the black metal. And it was a lot of fun. We were all original. We only had, I think, one cover, and we covered Paint It Black by the Stones once, but we never took it out of the practice spot. And it was a lot of fun. And in that time period, I discovered some other different kinds of music that I was into. And actually maybe even a little before that, because I'd already gotten into Nine Inch Nails and Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson. I was getting more into the techno industrial side of things. I wanted to take black metal and death metal and boom, merge them with Trent Reznor and Marilyn Manson and Ministry, because a lot of the guys were like, oh, you like that Manson guy? Oh, he's ripping off Ministry. And I was like, no, he's not. He's doing his own thing, man. So we did the band thing, and it was awesome. Painting our faces with the corpse paint. We were very hardcore. And then it just kind of fizzled out as band things do. We played a lot of shows in this area, and we made it to Cleveland. We got to play the Fantasy and Peabody's in the Flats and a couple other places. And then it just fizzled out. I met a groupie after one of the shows. Her and I hooked up, and we were together for the better part of a year. I lived in Cleveland with her, and somewhere around a year, I decided to come back. I'd done a reading for a movie part, and I had come home over the weekend, and to get back at me, she didn't call me and tell me that I got the part. And when I got back, it was like, oh, this old message here, you might want to listen to this. And it was like, too little, too late. They'd already been cast. So in the back of my mind, I was making plans to come home. This is over, and I need to move forward. It's always about going forward momentum. And I decided to come back here. And that's where we started hanging out in Dee's basement. And I met a lot of other musicians, and my buddies were all hanging out down there. And that's where I met a couple really big personalities, one of which was Satan John. And we were polar opposites. He knew that I was still a somewhat devout Christian, and he was on the opposite end of the spectrum, hence the name Satan. He was very, 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 very into the satanic mindset. And he would ask me questions, I'd ask him questions. We go back and forth, lots of debate, lots of arguing. And at a point, we got to be friends. And he gave me a series of books. He's like, look, I want you to read this, and then we can discuss it, because no one else here, is really into this stuff like we are. So here, check this out. And he gave me Demian by Herman Hesse. And I read it and had some, great ideas and great questions, and we got more into it. And then he gave me the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and I checked that out. And then we got into Thoth and some of the other stuff. And then after that was the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which I really liked, because I was more into the Buddhist philosophies than the heavy Anton LaVey Satanism that had kind of permeated the scene at that point. And I think the next book in line was Diary of a Drug Fiend, Aleister Crowley. And then I had gotten my first computer and was online doing my own looking into things. And this was around 2000, Y2K and all that jazz. And I was spending my late evenings doing some serious journalistic type work as I was wanting to write about some of this stuff. I was taking notes. I was trying to figure stuff out. I was learning about conspiracy theory and all this other lowbrow stuff that was kind of below boards. And Diary of a Drug Fiend was right up my alley. And I think I read it twice, and then I gave it back to him. I found Liber Allegis and Liber Oz, and was getting more into Crowley, and Do As Thou Wilt, Shall Be the Whole of the Law was real big with me back then, because it was just another way I figured out of saying that we all have free will, do as we will. That's it. Love is the law, love under will. Well, that smacks right with me. And in this time period of 99 and 2000, I had also met my first wife in January of that year. And she was into some of the darker stuff too. And we got pregnant. So I was going to do the right thing, I said. I remember I was working at Burger King as a assistant manager at the time. And during a lunch rush, she came in and stood at the counter and just started crying. And I thought there'd been an accident or a death or something. And I ran out front. I was like, what's going on? And she's like, I'm pregnant. And the whole place during the lunch rush just exploded. Everybody was laughing and clapping and cheering and everything. And I was just in shock. I said, well, go out to the car. I'll come out in a second. My lunch break's coming up. And I went out and talked to her. And I was like, you're sure that, X, Y, and Z? And yes. And okay, well, then we're going to do the right thing here. And I proposed to her right there. And she started crying and hugged me and was like, of course, that's all I wanted you to say. And we decided we were going to have our first child. And whenever you find out that you're having a kid as a man, your life drastically changes, and so does your mindset. I went from being Mr. Party guy all the time to thinking a little bit deeper now. Well, what am I going to do with this kid? How am I going to raise this kid? I want to raise this kid right. I don't want to raise a serial killer. What am I going to do? I can't keep acting like a kid anymore. I'm a grown-ass man for real now. We got to do something. And my mind started to turn a little bit back to its roots. And I think I was 24 going on 25. And I started talking to the new preacher down at church, because we had switched out while I was in high school to GJC. And he was a really good guy, but I didn't really know him other than to see him on Sunday at church. So I scheduled some time so we could meet and speak. And again, very in-depth conversations there. And he was into the esoteric stuff that I was talking about, which was kind of cool. He had questions, real questions. He wanted to know, I kept mentioning the third eye, and he's like, well, what exactly is that? And then when I explained to him that, psychedelics, you could turn that thing on, he was really kind of intrigued. And then we talked about other matters of spirituality, and then I had questions as well. And when he ran up into that wall where the answers were maybe a little inadequate, he was like, you know what? I got a great book for you that I think is right up your alley, and I'm done with it. I got what I needed from it and only went so far with it, but I have a feeling that this is really what you're asking and what you're looking for. Because I was looking into the spirituality side of things and the cause and effect and just, can you influence things with your will and things like that. So he gave me a book on Kabbalah. And I was really excited. First rule of Kabbalah, you'll never know everything. Page 1. And I was like, that's pretty cool. And then I went a little bit deeper. And then that led to studying a whole plethora of other things, from Carlos Castaneda and his book Tales of Power to the Keys of Solomon and some of those other books. But that's kind of why I started this conversation today, was because I'm getting a lot of questions about, why all this Aleister Crowley stuff from my friends that are more religious. How can you, And then I have the left side, because I'm kind of right down the middle, asking me, well, why are you still doing this if you're into Crowley? Crowley wasn't like that. And they're answering for Mr. Crowley. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. He started out much like me. He had a very religious father, Plymouth Brethren, and a very well-to-do father with money. And I'll bet your ass, young Edward Crowley, Aleister, decided that early on that being the type of person that he was, I'll bet he learned all those Bible verses like I did. And he did his research, and he was looking for answers. He was a seeker. So I have a feeling that he got his fill. So he had the same base as me in a way. Just in a way. I'm not making a direct comparison, but kind of. We both kind of had a religious beginning like that. So we had a base to build on and a springboard to go from. And yes, he was all about excess and all of that. But he also said that any operation that you do that is not about coming into contact with your holy guardian angel and your highest self should be considered a black magic working. And I'm going to let that turd sit in a punch bowl for a minute. And back on the subject of left and right, I like to draw from all sources before I make a decision and do my due diligence and do look into these things before I make a decision on which way to leap. I started out with Crowley, and then when I got to be about 25, I was having the kid, my first son, Eddie Jr., well, not Jr., but my namesake, and decided I was going to go the other route, and I was going to get baptized into the church. And I started doing a lot more reading of my Bible and a lot of the other stuff that came along with it, the greater and lesser keys of Solomon, the books of Moses, the Apocrypha, the Gnostic texts, a lot of things, lots of reading. And I found the Sefer HaRazim, the book of the angel Raziel. And people are like, well, you're doing your stuff this way, but you're not going all the way. No, I'm borrowing what I need and moving on. So, yes, with like the Abramelin working, you can work with the magical squares, and you can do this and that and the other and achieve your means to an end. But I did the same thing with the book of the angel Raziel. I didn't use the magical praxis. I didn't do any of that. What I found in it was the very last chapter, the description of the seventh firmament. That's what I needed to find. So once I got what I needed, I was out. So I didn't become a full-blown Kabbalist, or, well, I guess maybe in technical terms, because I was doing certain things. But that was kind of the beginning. And I'm going to cut this at 20 minutes because we're going to move on to the next part, and I'm just going to keep them separated that way. This was just a kind of an intro to how I got into spirituality and why I tick the way that I tick and why I believe the way that I believe. I have an unshakable faith in the Almighty, the Creator. And I'll come back to this spot where we're at, but I'll leave you with this. That faith comes from that light that's at the center of you, that you see and that you feel every time you get holy. And I don't care what religion you are. That's source. That's that little piece. That's that little piece that we were all given of source, the Almighty. And it operates like a two-way radio. So you can dial into that whenever you need to. And it makes you special. They say that whenever a human being goes out and is walking down the street, that the angels, they get out of the way and they say, whoa, here comes God. Because we have that peace. And it's a very important piece. Jesus taught about selfless love, loving your neighbor and loving God as you love yourself. Or actually loving your neighbor as you love yourself and loving God with all of your being, mind, body, spirit. That's selfless love when you love your neighbor that way. You're looking out for them. That is how you increase that inner light, is through selfless love. And then once you increase it so much, it has nowhere to go but out. That's why they say people who have reached that Christ consciousness, they glow. It's that inner light coming out. And you'll attract like moths to a flame. Some people will just keep banging into you and never know why. They'll never even know why. It's that inner light that you have glowing and shining. And this is what I'm attempting to do right now, is to increase that light, and keep increasing that light. You do this through acts of selfless love, helping people up when they fall down, lending a hand where you can, without any kind of thought of reward. That's what makes it selfless. You're doing it for the sake of doing it. You're not doing it because you're getting something from it. And this is what I'm attempting to put into practical application. Love and light, everybody.